Today I'm going to show you the best tips I know on how you can make smooth coasters in Theme Park Tycoon 2. But before we do get started, the first tip I can give is practice. You won't be able to make smooth coasters straight away. I have been making coasters for 4 years and I wouldn't even call mine perfect. The second tip I'm going to give you is to use a good coaster type. Try to avoid old models, as not looking at anyone in particular, but they are the roughest. For today I'm going to be building the multi-launch because that is the smoothest. Now to start with, I'm just going to be showing you how to use the advanced editor. If you already know this, check the timestamps in the description so that you can get to the actual tips part. So when clicking on the advanced editor, you will get this. Now, what do all these dots and spheres mean? First off, simply this arrow is to change the length. If you're on PC, hold, click, and drag. If you're on mobile, that's the same, but instead just use your finger and drag. That applies with all of these dots, so I won't repeat that again. Now, what do these dots do? This green one changes the y-axis, basically left to right. This red one changes the z-axis, up and down. And this blue one, banking. But now, because I have just done this and I don't want my piece to look like this, and rather than me trying to line it back up again, I'm just going to go down here and click reset, and look at that, the piece is back to how it was before. To change the track feature, that's pretty self-explanatory. You click on this. Some of these are coaster dependent, but every coaster model will have normal, chain lift, brakes, and station. I would recommend just to build station with basic editor though. Don't try line that up with advanced editor, it's too difficult. So I'm going to extend my piece a little bit, and then can you see this over here that says pivot offset? Now if you're building a ride where the track sits above you, use negative pivot offset, but as this time the track is below us, use positive. And you'll notice that this basically adds heart lining for us. What I would recommend to do is keep this first piece relatively small, turn it a bit in the direction of the banking, just a small amount, and then down here there is this auto smooth feature, the yaw/pitch, and then off. You want to enable off, and now drag this green dot the other direction only slightly so that you get this. Now this is heart lining, and basically a good way to just measure it is if the track rotates around the train, it's heart lined well. If it doesn't, it's not heart lined enough, or it's heart lined too much. Now your piece probably looks like this. What you want to do is click this reset button here, and that will just forget the previous track piece for now. Now you want to click yaw and pitch. I would recommend using this one rather than the full, as this basically locks the banking in place. Ignore where it says roll, just read that as the banking. Obviously how much this does turn is up to you, but I'd recommend when you are making track pieces that they don't turn any more than around 90 degrees, because otherwise, yeah, it just doesn't look too good. Now, something that a lot of people get annoyed at is then they'll go for booster and they'll get this message. How you can solve that is going over to the roll and clicking reset. Now, this is also where the yaw and pitch is handy, because if you had this on full and then you started moving the track, look at that, the roll's gone up, and even if it's just slightly, if I now go booster, it won't let me. So yeah, reset, keep it on yaw and pitch, and then you can move it around, and then pretty easily, yeah, the next piece, it will let you have it. Before you do place this piece though, I'd recommend to do kind of like what you did here. Turn the piece slightly, click off again, and move the track slightly as well, and that just creates some nice heart lining. If you want your launch flat, you go to rotate spline mode. Now yes, a whole new menu. Oh my goodness, this looks very confusing. This is the end positioning of the track, if I had to describe it. So this middle one is the red one basically. So you can see as I move the red one, this number moves 2. If you want your launch to be flat, set that to 0. But now you will notice there is a annoying massive dip back in the track. You can then move this up a slight bit just so there is still heart lining, but it doesn't drop down too much. And then place the piece. And now if you stayed on these two, you should still be at 0 banking, so you can easily place your boosters. That's all I'm going to say for this segment because I don't want to reveal too much. So now let's get on to some actual tips. Anyway, picking up where we left off, I would say to reference real life coasters and profiling and track elements like that. If there is a ride type that you know but don't really know the names of any of the coasters, just search up that ride type POV and you should be able to find some on YouTube. And just look at how that company makes their track, how they profile their elements, and what speed they go through their elements. Knowing what real life coasters are like helps a lot with making ones in this game if you want them to be realistic. But now let's get to the building of the roller coasters. So because you have either skipped or watched the first half, you will know what all this means now. Right before we get started is to use pivot offset, but not high pivot offset. I would say the absolute most you want to use is 2, and then for inverted rides, -2. Obviously you don't have to go that high, maybe even like 1, and then still make sure to add your own heart lining. For the next tip, the faster the track is going, the longer you should make the pieces. But I do need to explain this a bit, because this one is a bit dependent on how you build your rides, and also what you consider a long track piece. So for this first pre-lift here, because it is taken slowly, it's not banked a lot, and it's also using quite small pieces. But then on this first drop here, you can see I'm using a lot longer pieces. As it goes down the drop, the pieces do get bigger. So I would say this piece length is about as long as you want to make your pieces. And also the quicker the train is going, the more drawn out the pieces do need to be as well. But don't let your layouts become too drawn out and too slow, otherwise that's just a boring ride. And then if I give a quick POV of what I've got so far, you'll see that as it gets to the bottom of a drop, there is a sensible amount of force being applied. When you are like rotating your track, whether that be vertical or horizontal, try not to rotate it more than 90 degrees roughly. As you can see, if I start rotating this more than 90, the track starts to lose a bit of its quality for some reason, and it starts to like chunk up a bit. But if you keep it less than 90, it's a lot less noticeable. For the 6th tip, that's to do with heart lining. Now, heart lining does make your rides better, but you do have to be careful because auto smooth is off. So if you don't do it right, it can be rough. In the direction that the turn is going to go, you turn it slightly, then turn off auto smooth and do a bit like that. Another point, which is something that I did say as a joke a few videos back, if the track doesn't look smooth, it isn't. So if I did something like this and you can see that the track looks bad, it will be. Even if it's a lot more subtle as well, it will still be rough. For tip 8, when making rolls, corkscrews or 0G rolls or rolls, I would recommend to use 4 pieces. One which goes 90, then 180 minus 90. I mean, it doesn't matter which way you do it, but I would recommend to do 4 pieces. And then also 4 rolls, slightly angle the track downwards, bend it in a bit, and then add a little bit of smoothening. That's not a perfect roll, but that's a good roll. Okay, so I'm really not bothered on how the coaster looks between these elements. For vertical loops, I find it easier to also use 4 pieces. Use pieces that are smaller than this one, so like make sure that this grey line doesn't go all the way to the end, so you get that teardrop shape. Of course, this doesn't work on a large scale, but when it is smaller vertical loops, I think 4 pieces are the best way to do it. And there you go, a nice vertical loop made in about a minute. And then for when making airtime hills, I find it's easy to move the track up a bit to however much you want to. Then go to rotate spline mode and completely flatten it out. Extend this piece out a bit and then turn off auto smooth and move it up a bit, so that way you get it, as it gets to the top of the hill, it gets sharper. And then to do it in reverse, you just move the track downwards and then disable auto smooth like that, and then that's fairly simple and straightforward. And then also for 9, going back onto rotate spline mode, if you want to make a flat turn, don't try and guess, just flatten it here with this middle one and then keep off auto smooth. That way you can create a perfectly flat turn without having to like keep trying and then it's not perfect. And then also for building like lift hills and brake runs, if you do plan to add catwalks to them, make sure that when you build the piece you record down where it was on rotate spline mode. So yeah, basically when you're building lift hills and brake runs, try to make it nice easy numbers like 140, so that way it's kind of creating a lift hill that can be easily recreated and added to with primitives, and it doesn't really change how the lift hill looks, it just makes it easier for future, so it's win-win. And the last is just to keep rides at sensible speeds. Sometimes the ride can be smooth, but if it's going too fast it won't be. This coaster isn't a great example because it's not the tallest and it does go through it a bit slower than I would have liked it to, but don't be afraid to include some slower elements on a coaster and then still some quicker, more forceful elements like that. This one is also about practice and just finding the right balance between a fun and forceful ride and a boring ride or a too forceful ride. So that's it from me. I'm not very good at doing tutorials, but I thought I'd do this as a one-off anyway just to try it out. So if you have enjoyed this, please do subscribe. It'll help out a lot and we're nearly at 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.